SealToday.com reporter, friend of the show. Good morning, David Hunn.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly. How are you, bud?
Good morning.
Two big stories you got. First, let's start with the Bush Grants Farm story. This has been I don't want to call it a comedy of errors, but this whole family spat has been played out on the front pages. So now the family wants to keep it and wants to run it themselves?
Yes. So it's really unclear to me exactly what dynamic is going on here. My understanding was always that nobody in the family wanted to run the place anymore.
Right.
And now they're saying, and maybe I just misunderstood, but now they're saying that they don't believe Billy will preserve the park for the long term. They don't think he has the means or experience, they said, the four. So, just to remind folks, this is kind of four of the siblings, the daughters and sons of Gussie Bush, right, the beer baron,
right,
versus two of them, Billy Bush and Adolphus Bush. And, they always seem to say they wanted to sell to the zoo, that was the best thing for the long term, and they were ready to kind of clean their hands of it. Now they say Billy can't run it, that he doesn't have the means or the experience, and they want to do it themselves. Now, what makes it ultra interesting for me is the zoo is saying with no uncertainty that they are not interested. So I guess when I first heard this, I kind of figured the brothers and sisters would just hold on to it for a couple of years and then flip it to the zoo, right?
Right.
But that.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's a family squabble played out on the front pages. When my sisters have a family squabble, we just yell at each other. It's not played out on the world stage.
McGraw, that's such a good point, and it's such an interesting, if my sister gets mad at me, she doesn't sue me, right?
And it's over. You didn't get me a beer, right? It isn't. I want your $1 billion Grants Farm.
More likely, I didn't come home to visit, but same idea.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the zoo, you can certainly understand the zoo's side of this. They don't want to get anywhere near this, so they're saying thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to step into this. But ultimately, I think the rest of us only care about what's going to happen to Grants Farm. Is it going to stay free? Is it going to stay this sort of beautiful land and this sort of iconic park for the next generations? And that's, I guess, very much up in the air.
Well, there's no question that this puts, the four siblings. That their offer is for $26 million. Billy's was for $24.1. So this offer is higher than Billy's, which means the trustees have to consider it because they're bound, by duty to get the best deal for the trust, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So that means that the brothers and sisters here are definitely in the driver's seat. There's no question that their offer is better. It also, the big fight early on was, what did Gussie want? What did he say in his will? Billy and Adolphus were arguing that he was clear that he wanted the farm to stay with family. Well, now it does.
Right.
So they're clearly in the driver's seat. It's also a little uncertain exactly what the judge is going to say. I don't think we know if this will even stay in court. Maybe it's just a trust matter at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe the judge will throw it out.
And if one side gets it, right, then they can break it up and parse it off. They do anything they want. They can turn around and sell it to the zoo. They can hold on to it. But we know that Grants Farm is losing money right now.
And lots of it.
Right.
I forget, I put it in an earlier story. It's $1 million a year, maybe more.
Right, yeah. And so we'll just have to wait and see what happens. All right, that's David Hunn. Now he's working double duty this week because he's got another story. I love the second story. I love the first one. But the second story, which is more or less, talks about Harry's, but it asks the ultimate question is, how much damage, if any, has Ballpark Village done to downtown bars and restaurants?
Right. Yeah, I mean, this question, I think, is a really important question for the region going forward. What capacity does downtown have to sustain bars and restaurants, and how many? You need people downtown to sustain bars and restaurants. Are there enough? And it's this whole Harry's issue and their this kind of inch-thick file in the Excise Commission, the City Liquor Commission. It's just kind of this gold mine of data on this question.
Yeah.
So really fun to dig into.
I was shocked. I was shocked to find out that there was underage drinking going on at Harry's. That's one. But you mentioned in the story Dubliner, Prime 1000, Mike Shannon's. I mean, all those other bars all around downtown and sort of just outside of downtown that have closed their doors in the last 6 months.
And it sounds like the owner, I mean, he's the only one out of all these restaurants and bars to say, yes, it is Ballpark Village.
Right. Yeah, no, he is. The rest of them, you know, I really tried to beat down the doors here, and everybody else was kind of like circumspect about Ballpark Village. And I'm not sure if they were just being polite or if they really believe it. I think some of them clearly, you know, probably both ways for some. But I think, you know, there's no question that Missy Kelly, the downtown STL booster, kind of has a good point, which is, you know, the world is changing, and can you stay the same steakhouse for 30 years? You know, she said outright, like, I think steakhouses and millennials probably don't get along great, and I thought that was a really interesting point.
Millennials.
No,
again.
and the point where she talked about there were 90 new restaurants that opened up and 40 that have closed. I mean, restaurants come and go.
Yep.
Some last, some don't. Some have a life cycle. It's all valid. But I also thought that your point that Cordish made in your story, which was, hey, we don't just market to Cardinal fans. We market outside of the region, so we're helping to bring new people into St. Louis.
Yeah, that guy, you know, so I had a pretty good-sized talk with him. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit enough in the story, but he said, you know, the backstory on that was like, they're sending people to national bus tour associations to try to get, those huge buses that roll down the arch, down the riverfront there, and like drop off, 87 old people. Like, they're trying to get everything, and families, and everything you can think of.
Yeah.
How is Ballpark Village doing year to year? Do we know? I guess it's difficult for the separate restaurants.
No, we don't. And that's a really good point. That may be something I can figure out. I'll look into it.
Well, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but it's going gangbusters. There's lots of people there all the time.
Yeah. I mean, sure, anecdotally.
Yeah, it looks like a success. Yeah. David Hunt, have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good talking to you both. Thank you.
824. He's the goods, and he's our buddy, and he fills in from time to time. We're turning him into a radio star.